big or not too big? That is the question. When I first started playing the drums, I didn't know jack squat about cymbals. I knew all the major brand names, of course, because I was reading Modern Drummer and any other publication back then. There was Drum Magazine as well. But back then, I just knew what was advertised to me. I had a pair of CB700 hi-hats, 14-inch, that when I stomped on the hi-hat too hard to keep time, they would invert like an umbrella in the wind. Oh man, that was really frustrating. I had a 14-inch CB700 crash, and then I had a ride that came with the kit that my dad bought me, but that also was a horrible piece of explanative. And whoever sold it to my dad, the cymbal was epoxied, no lie. But back then, all that mattered to me was having the same cymbal company, right? If it was going to be Sabian, it'd be all Sabian. Or if it was going to be all Paiste, it'd be all Paiste, and so forth, right? Back in my 16-year-old mind, 15-year-old mind, that's what meant being one step closer to being closer to a professional, if that makes any sense. Yes, Brian, just having the same name cymbals on all of them makes you a professional. Keep believing that, kid. Once I had all the same names on these cymbals, then I was ready for the big time, in my mind. I didn't understand tonal characteristics. I didn't understand thickness of a cymbal. I didn't understand a thicker cymbal would get you a brighter sound. I didn't understand that a thinner cymbal would get you a warmer sound. I didn't understand the difference between hand-hammered and lathed, or brilliant finished versus non-brilliant finished. Fast forward the day I decided I was going to become a professional drummer. I had $600 cash in hand. I went down to the infamous local Tommy's Drum Shop here in Austin, Texas, and I bought all Sabian. So I bought a set of 13-inch hi-hats because I was so in love with Dennis Chambers. I bought 2 crashes, a 14 and a 16, and I bought a ride, 20-inch, and I can't remember the model of that ride, but it was pretty thick, and a China. But the most important thing is I didn't match any of them. I just bought them. And in my mind, I'm ready to rock. Hello everybody, my name is Brian Christopher Mendes and welcome to another installment of Mendiesel 101. My new web series that deals with gear, lessons, humor, and anything else I've learned in my 23 plus years as a professional drummer. Before we get started, I would like to take the time to mention my new website is up where you could find merch such as this shirt I'm wearing, this hat, as well as other styles of t-shirts and other designs that are available on my website too. You can also find on my website my new downloadable video on paradiddles that helps you facilitate better control of your hands and feet. This video is accompanied with PDF sheet music as well. And if you're new to my channel, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button as well. That's if you like the video. And please follow me on Facebook and Instagram. After my first time being in the studio and being told my cymbal sounded like hot bum booty.
So how was that?
Yo, your cymbals sound exactly like Oscar the Grouch farted on trash can lid, son.
I started to rethink my approach to cymbals. My then drum teacher and mentor got me really into exploring a cymbal, being able to pull out different sounds and tones. Because back then, all I thought a cymbal for was just to bash it. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and then... He really got me into understanding how cymbals work. But what I mean by that is not only being able to draw different characteristics and tones out of your cymbals, but understanding what that cymbal is made for and what it sounds best with and what it can do and cannot do, the limitations and its limits. You know, that sounded kind of odd, but you know, understand this. You hit a cymbal too hard and it's just not going to do much other than choke out and then probably break at a certain point. Then one night I went out and saw local badass drummer J.J. Johnson, who has a resume that is just long as my arm and littered with A-list players. And I'll never forget walking into this small room where he had these huge cymbals set up. And I remember thinking, what is he doing with all these big ass cymbals? Like, this room fits like 50 people. And he was on a simple singer-songwriter gig too. Then he started playing and my mind was blown because the cymbals sounded so good. I could not believe how well they sat in the mix with everything else. And then on top of that, I remember thinking, oh wow, I'm not being blasted in the ear right now with an ice pick with that over-the-top, shrill, harsh sound that cymbals have sometimes in these small clubs. I was sold. I immediately went down to Tommy's. Not that night, of course, because, I had to wait the next day. So Tommy was gracious enough to call up Sabian and ask them if they would make those 15-inch groove hats for me. To which they replied, we've never done it before, but we can do it. We don't know how it's gonna sound. I replied with, I don't care, just make them. One of the best decisions I ever made. I still have those hats, and I can confidently say I have the first 15-inch Manhattan groove hats that Sabian made. After that, I started progressing to bigger cymbals. So then at that point, I went to 18-inch crashes. Then after that, I went to 20-inch crashes that Sabian custom made. And those were hand-hammered brilliant finishes with different weights. And I think I had 4 of those made. Then I graduated to 22-inch crashes with a 24-inch crash in there as well. Sounds so sweet. All my rides went from 20 to 22 to 24. I now have about 4 24-inch rides that I used for different gigs. Now, this is my philosophy on cymbals. This is not the law, and this is my opinion. So understand that before we go any further. Understand that cymbals and everything else when it comes to music-related instrumentation is always personal preference, how it works better in your hands and how you make it sound. But I do think with cymbals, there is a universal acceptance to what I'm about to say. Because from all the session work that I've done in the last 15 years, I've had nothing but compliments. Now, mind you, I'm doing singer-songwriter course. I'm also doing country music. I'm also doing rock. And from time to time, I will do some metal. What I've learned in my last, especially 15 plus years of having these types of cymbals, that they sound great universally. Every sound engineer that I've dealt with loves the way my cymbals sound. And I think the key to that is the size. I use really big cymbals. Once I started going bigger, I realized that the cymbals were no longer on top of the mix. They were now in the mix. And I can't stress to you enough, guys and gals, that cymbals are metal. That is a given, right? You're not gonna have any other type of material used with cymbals like you would with drums. We can make these, of course, out of wood, and then different types of wood. And then we can use acrylic, we can use metal, different types of metal. And those will give you so many different variations with the drums. But with cymbals, it's always pretty much metal, and there might be some different formulations as far as how much of what goes into that cymbal. Other than that, cymbals are metal. And metal has plenty of top end. It just does, because it's metal. I remember vividly auditioning for Bruce Robeson, who is a Grammy award-winning country artist. Now, he doesn't play country rock like is really prevalent nowadays. He plays a more traditional style, and he's very soft and quiet on stage. He shows up after I set up, he sits down, and he turns around and looks at my drums, and he goes, whoa, man, those cymbals are kind of big. This is not that type of gig. That's my Bruce Robeson impersonation. To which I replied, hey man, don't worry. It's all good. Trust me. Later after the audition, he offered me the gig, says, hey man, you got the gig, sound great. And I cannot believe how good those cymbals sound. I thought I was gonna be blown away, I said, I understand. Because there are a lot of stereotypes when it comes to big cymbals and big snare drums, for a matter of fact. And I will cover that in another video. soon to be released. But the reason why big cymbals work so well is because they don't rise above the mix. They sit in the mix. And when it sits above the mix, then you can have some issues. This can translate to problems live on stage with mic bleed, as well as being too harsh for the audience to deal with. This also translates into problems in the studio when you have a more controlled environment than you would in a live situation on a stage with an audience. And when this happens, you're basically leaving the engineer to polish a turd. I hate to say it, but this especially rings true in metal. That's right, I said it. I said it. Huh. Now, I'm not bagging on metal. I grew up listening to plenty of thrash bands, plenty of progressive metal bands, so don't even go there. You can't go there. I love it. But the truth of the matter is, more often than not, metal drummers have the worst choice of cymbals. Way over the top, just too harsh. One of the great examples of cymbal choices in metal is Matt Garska from Animals as Leader and Thomas Hoke, I don't know how you pronounce it, from Meshuggah. Those guys are phenomenal drummers, but they use cymbals that sit in the mix as opposed to sitting above the mix. Matt doesn't truly use a lot of big cymbals, he just uses darker cymbals, which is fine as well. If you guys don't feel like buying a really big cymbal, you can always buy a smaller cymbal, but just pick a darker choice. Thomas, on the other hand, has some pretty big cymbals. I love it. I love big cymbals. Understand this though, you can pick a smaller cymbal that is darker, but there is something about having a larger cymbal, especially when you want to crash ride on it. A smaller cymbal, you know, will flop a lot more than a larger cymbal, and you're able to get a more even, as opposed to on a smaller cymbal where it's going. Now, if you want that sound, that's another deal. But if you want that sound that's consistent, that goes through and through without wavering up and down, then you'll want to get a bigger cymbal. Now, not only does a bigger cymbal provide a darker sound that allows it to sit in the mix, but you also get more control physically with a bigger cymbal than you would a smaller cymbal. And the same thing with hi-hats as well. If you want a nice shimmer that's nice and smooth, that goes all the way through as you're playing 4 bars, 8 bars, or whatever it may be, or an accent for the downbeat, upbeat, whatever it may be, it's a lot easier to get control out of that and get the sound you want with a larger set of hi-hats than it is a very small set of hi-hats. I had an oh shit moment which made me go from 13 to 14 inch hi-hats, which is when I bought those Manhattan groove hats. Started playing this song and immediately was like, oh man, that's too much. The hi-hats just kept opening much more than I needed them to, and they were so small that they would just wobble around and give me a very undesirable sound and a very ugly look from the people in the band. Now I actually play 18s. It depends, of course, on the song or the session that I'm recording for or the band I'm playing with, but all in all, I always play with big hats. Lots of control, and the tonality of them just sit in the mix. Now remember guys, this is my philosophy on cymbals. This is just an opinion, and it is not the end-all be-all stop where, yes, my word is law and you must obey. I'm just giving you my 2 cents on what I've observed in my 23 plus years of playing the drums professionally, being on stage and off, as well as lots of studio dates. My cymbal choices have garnered me lots of praise and great sounding recordings. I highly recommend that you go out and try. I highly recommend that you go out and try darker or bigger cymbals. I'm gonna go with just go try some bigger cymbals. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at what you hear. Now remember, cymbals already have top end. Unless they're designed to not have any top end at all, that's a different story. But traditional cymbals already have top end. They're metal. There's gonna be plenty of top end for them to cut through and for the audience to hear or for the mics to pick up. But with bigger cymbals, I do believe you will have better results and your sound engineer, both live and in the studio, will thank you. I'm Brian Christopher Mendes. Peace and chicken grease, motherfuckers.